Samuel Ortiz walked into the community center on a quiet Tuesday morning. The kind of morning when people move slowly and sunlight touches everything gently. The woman at the front desk barely looked up at first. She assumed he was someone asking for directions or wanting to use the computer room. He waited with both hands resting on the strap of his old leather bag. The bag looked worn, like something that had traveled far and seen many places. When the woman finally asked how she could help him, he spoke softly, telling her he wanted to join the open music program. She handed him a registration form, and he filled it out carefully, writing slowly, not because he could not write, but because he seemed the kind of person who valued neatness. When she asked what instrument he wanted to participate with, he paused. Then he simply said piano, almost like he hoped the word would slide past unnoticed. Once he was registered, he walked into the music hall, which was just a long room with foldable chairs, a few tables, and an old upright piano at the front. It wasn't the shiny type one might see on a stage. This one had scratches, uneven polish, and keys that looked slightly yellowed. Still, there was something warm about it. He chose a chair at the back, not a corner seat, not near anyone, just in a place where no one would really notice him. People around him were talking and laughing, and everyone seemed to know someone. A few of them looked over at him, but no one said much more than a polite nod. Some newcomers spoke confidently. One woman talked loudly about how she was learning guitar and wanted to someday become a performer. A young boy ran from chair to chair because he liked noise and movement. A middle-aged man was telling others how excited he was to try music again after 20 years. But Samuel stayed quiet, listening, watching, breathing calmly. There was something about the way he sat, gentle posture, steady eyes, hands folded with patience. He looked like someone who carried stories but had no rush to tell them. When the instructor walked in, everyone sat straighter. Her name was not glamorous, and she didn't pretend to be more important than her role. She greeted everyone with a cheerful voice, then began explaining the class with no pressure, no competition, just music for anyone who had even an ounce of interest. The goal was simple: explore sound, learn basic techniques, and share what one could. Then the instructor went around the room asking each person why they were there. People shared ambitions, fears, hopes, and jokes. When it was Samuel's turn, he simply said, "I just want to spend time around music again." His tone was calm. The instructor smiled and told him he was welcome. But some people around him reacted differently. One whispered something about how he seemed shy. Another said maybe he had never touched a piano before. Someone laughed lightly, saying he looked like he was going to fall asleep in class. They didn't say it unkindly, but they also didn't understand him. After introductions, the instructor invited participants, one by one, to walk up and try basic exercises. The first person played a short tune. The second tried something simple, smiling nervously. A teenager played something on his keyboard that sounded loud, but not very controlled. Everyone clapped politely. When it was Samuel's turn, the instructor looked at him with kind eyes. She asked if he would like to try something, maybe just a few notes. He shook his head with a soft smile and said others should play first. There was no anger or anxiety in his voice, just humility. She nodded, respecting his space. From the back row, he sat upright and listened carefully. His eyes followed the instructor's movements. He studied everyone's attempts, not judgmentally, but attentively, as if music was something fragile and precious. During breaks, people pulled out snacks. The young boy asked if Samuel wanted a cookie. Samuel thanked him gently and took one, smiling. But adults didn't really talk to him. People assumed he had little experience. After all, anyone truly skilled would have approached the piano first, right? Anyone truly confident would have shown something, even if small. That assumption felt comfortable to them. Nobody questioned it. What people did notice, however, was that he never looked lost. He never fidgeted. He did not seem confused when the instructor discussed scales, chords, or posture. He looked like someone hearing familiar words, not learning new ones. But maybe, they thought, he was just a good listener. When class ended, Samuel stayed seated as everyone rushed toward the door. People talked loudly about their small performances. Someone argued that the piano needed tuning. Another said it was fun but difficult. He sat quietly, just taking in the mood of the room. The instructor walked over and asked gently, "Did you feel comfortable today?" He looked up and smiled, a genuine smile that didn't need to prove anything. "Yes, thank you. Would you like to try playing next time?" She asked. "If there's time," he said. "I will try something." And that was all. He stood up slowly, no hurry in his steps, and walked out of the building. The old leather bag swung against his side. People leaving the parking lot barely noticed him. That night, he sat alone in his small apartment kitchen, drinking tea at a wooden table that had uneven legs. The apartment had little decoration. A framed photograph leaned against the wall, not hung, just resting. The picture showed two people seated beside a piano, somewhere that looked like a concert hall. But he didn't look at the photo long. He simply turned it face down. The next morning, he returned to normal life, his quiet routines, his ordinary errands, his short conversations with neighbors that contained no detail deeper than good day. Yet something inside him felt gently awakened, not large, not overwhelming, but like a soft light had been turned on. The following week, when he arrived for the second class, he entered the room quietly again. He didn't try to talk to anyone, yet some people had started remembering him not by name, but as the quiet one, the man who never played. Some newcomers assumed he was new. They treated him the way someone treats a beginner, telling him which seat was best or how to register. Even though he already knew, he just thanked them politely. The instructor welcomed everyone back, explaining they would continue from last week. She reminded people there was no competition, only expression. Then she asked again if anyone wanted to start the warm-up exercises. A few hands went up immediately, and Samuel waited, once again letting others go first. There was a different energy this time. The instructor looked at him with a bit of curiosity. Some participants noticed he had no sheet music, no notebook, nothing except the same old bag. Still, no one pressed him. When others played, he watched silently. His eyes did not wander. His attention was steady. He listened so deeply that one might think the room was his only world. He wasn't thinking about showing anything. He wasn't thinking about proving anyone wrong. He was simply present. At one point, someone beside him whispered, "Don't you want to try? You're allowed to." He nodded politely and said, "Soon." He said it without hesitation, and the person looked puzzled, because that answer didn't sound like someone afraid. It sounded like someone waiting for the right moment. Class continued. People missed notes, stumbled, laughed at their mistakes. A few played confidently, but even their confidence felt a bit rehearsed. The instructor encouraged everyone equally. At the end of the session, she turned to Samuel and asked again, "If you're comfortable, you may play next week." He looked at the piano for a moment, not at the scratches, not at the chipped corners, but at the keys themselves, as if remembering something distant. "I will try next session," he said, and that settled it. When he walked outside, the air felt cool and gentle. He stood for a moment before going home, not long but long enough to take a deep breath and feel something unlock within him, slowly and quietly, like a door creaking open after years of silence. No one in that room knew what he carried. No one knew what music once meant to him. No one knew that his silence was not fear, but respect for the piano, for beginnings, for endings, for memories that still lived somewhere inside him even though he avoided touching them. Next week would be different. He already knew that. And without announcing anything, without needing anyone to expect anything, he prepared himself not for applause, not for recognition, but for a moment he had postponed for years. He walked away, leaving nothing behind but the empty sound of quiet footsteps. Well inside the community center, a piano sat waiting out of tune, imperfect and ready. A week passed, and the community center looked brighter than before. The afternoon sun was coming through the windows in long yellow lines, lighting the floor like warm stripes. People arrived earlier this time. Some came with folders, some with snacks, and some just came full of excitement. Everyone wanted to be better than last week. When Samuel walked in, a few people noticed him. Someone waved, and he returned the gesture with a soft smile. He sat in the same place, third row, not too close, not too far. He didn't rush, didn't speak loudly, didn't try to take space that wasn't his. His calmness blended easily with the quiet air of the room. The instructor welcomed everyone back. She wrote a few basic notes on the board, explaining rhythm and timing. People leaned forward, nodding, taking notes. Some even held their phones, recording what she said. During all of this, Samuel simply watched. On one side of the room, two people whispered something about him. "That guy didn't even try last week," one said. "He probably doesn't know how to play." The other replied, "He should at least try the warm-ups." They didn't say it to hurt him, but they also didn't realize he could hear them. On the other side, a young woman tried to catch the instructor's attention again and again, asking questions about posture. Someone else kept bragging about the new electric keyboard he bought just yesterday. Everyone seemed to have something to show, everyone except him. When the instructor asked for volunteers, hands shot up in the air. One person rushed to the piano first and tried to play a basic song. He stumbled through most of it, but everyone clapped because it took courage. The next person played something loud and energetic, though not very smooth. Some laughed at mistakes, but in a friendly way. When the instructor looked at Samuel, she didn't push, she only said, "Whenever you're ready, you're welcome." He nodded and remained seated. People glanced over his shoulder, curious about why he never stepped up. He didn't bring sheet music, didn't bring notes, didn't bring even a pencil. That made some people think he had nothing prepared. While others played, he sat with the same gentle focus as last week. When someone hit a wrong key, he blinked slowly but did not react harshly. When someone played correctly, he smiled faintly. It was almost impossible to tell what he really felt. At break time, some of the group gathered near the snack table. They spoke about how the piano needed tuning, and how they wanted to eventually perform in front of others. Some parents came in, greeting their children with excitement. Samuel walked quietly toward the hallway where there was a water dispenser. He filled a paper cup and stood by the wall, just watching the scene without looking lonely. It was simply how he existed, calm, unhurried. Someone approached him. "You're new to piano, right?" he asked. Samuel shook his head gently. "I've touched one a few times," he said with a soft smile. "You should try today." The person insisted. "If there's time," Samuel replied, like he did the week before. The person walked away, still puzzled. Then a young boy approached him. "Are you going to play today?" he asked in a small voice. Samuel looked down at him kindly. "Maybe," he said. "I think you'll be good," the boy said. "And why do you think that?" Samuel asked. "You listen more than anyone else," the boy replied. Samuel smiled, not because the boy was right, but because it was rare for anyone to observe something rather than assume. The break ended soon. Everyone sat down again, and the instructor began another round of participation. Someone attempted to play with both hands for the first time. Someone else tried a soft melody. The group applauded every attempt. What made this session different was that the instructor gently paused after a few performers and said, "There is still someone we haven't heard, and this class is about sharing." She didn't force him. She only looked at him with encouragement. All eyes shifted towards Samuel. He sat still at first, almost motionless. People waited. Someone whispered, "He's going to say no again." Another whispered, "He probably doesn't know anything." Then he stood up, not rushed, not nervous, just quiet. He walked down the few steps to the front, stopping right beside the piano. His old bag rested on a chair behind him, untouched. He didn't take anything out. The instructor asked him gently, "Would you like to warm up? Maybe a simple scale?" He nodded. He placed both hands on the keys, not dramatically, not confidently, not nervously, just naturally. He pressed a single note. It was soft, clear, and somehow seemed centered. Then he played the simplest warm-up pattern with both hands in perfect balance. His fingers curved softly, his shoulders relaxed. His body looked like it belonged there, not trying, just existing. People expected him to struggle. He didn't. He finished that small warm-up, then took his hands away. Everyone clapped, surprised by how smooth it was. "That was good," someone whispered. "Beginner luck," another joked. He sat back down again, before anyone could ask him to do more. But now, something had changed. The room felt different. People didn't laugh anymore when he didn't volunteer. They waited. The instructor looked at him thoughtfully and asked, "Would you like to try something longer? Maybe next session?" He nodded again. The instructor smiled, not because she knew something, but because she could feel something. After class ended, groups gathered again. Some were talking about songs they wanted to learn. Some talked about performances they had seen online. The boy showed his parent the cookie he saved. Samuel picked up his bag and walked through the center like he always did, quiet, polite, unhurried. But this time, one of the others walked behind him. "You played nicely," he said. "Thank you," Samuel replied. "Why didn't you play more?" "Next time," Samuel said. That was his only answer. That night, in his apartment, he set the bag down on a chair and walked into the living room. In the corner stood an instrument covered with a cloth, not fancy, not new. He lifted the cloth slightly, revealing the dust on top. He sat down on the small bench, not to play but just to sit. His hand hovered above the keys, not touching them. He breathed in and whispered to the air, as if talking to someone not there. Soon. Then he stood up again. He didn't need to play yet. Not at home. Not there. The next day, he passed by a music store. Through the window, he saw a piano lesson being taught to a little girl who laughed when she missed a note. He smiled faintly and walked on. He visited a park where someone played a recorder, not well, but happily. He listened, then kept walking. Something inside him was turning back toward music, but not aggressively, slowly, like someone waking from sleep. When the next week arrived and he returned to class, people treated him differently. Not better, not worse. Just with curiosity. Someone asked him, "Do you practice at home?" He answered, "Sometimes." Someone else asked, "Have you taken classes before?" He simply smiled. The instructor started warm-ups again, and the room filled with sound. People clapped after each performance, even when it wasn't perfect. When it was nearly the end, she looked at him again. "If you are ready," she said, "we would love to hear something longer." He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He walked to the front again. This time, no one whispered, everyone waited. He sat at the piano like someone sits down to rest, not perform. He placed his hands gently on the keys and closed his eyes. Then he began again, just a scale, just a simple phrase. But even that simple phrase sounded steady and unbroken. And something about the way he paused afterward made people hold their breath. Because it wasn't hesitation, it was intention. He pressed 3 slow notes, then 4, then stopped. Everyone waited for more. But he stood up again, smiled, and said, "Next time." The instructor only nodded. Everyone respected it now. Something was building. Something unspoken. Not dramatic. Not loud. But something that made people come back the next week, curious, wondering what he would finally reveal. And Samuel walked away with the same quiet steps, calm, simple, yet carrying something in him that no one had seen fully. Not yet. Next time would no longer be just warming up. Next time, he knew, would be real. The third week arrived, and the community center seemed busier than usual. People showed up early. Some even practiced outside the room before class began. There was a quiet excitement in the air, not loud, not spoken, but everyone felt it. Some people wondered what Samuel would do this time. Others pretended to be uninterested, but they kept looking in his direction the moment he entered the building. He walked in wearing the same quiet presence he always carried. His old bag hung at his side, its strap rubbed smooth at the edges. He gave a gentle nod to the person at the front desk, then made his way to his usual seat. From that seat, he looked at the piano in front of the room, not in anticipation, not in fear, but with a stillness that gave nothing away. Class began with warm-ups. Everyone took turns again, practicing small techniques. People clapped, shared comments, and the instructor praised each attempt with patience. But today, for the first time, the instructor looked at Samuel sooner than usual. She said softly, "If you feel comfortable today, we would love to hear something from you. No pressure, just an invitation." He nodded, but did not move yet. Others continued playing and sharing. Someone tried a piece from a music book and stumbled halfway. Someone else played a short melody and smiled at their own courage. The atmosphere was friendly. When there were fewer people left to play, the room became quiet. The instructor didn't say anything else. She only turned slightly toward the piano. Samuel stood up, not rushed, not nervous, just ready. He walked forward slowly, and every sound in that room seemed to fade, not because people fell silent intentionally, but because something about his steps quieted them. He reached the piano, lightly brushed dust away from the side panel, and sat down. He didn't take anything out of his bag. He didn't look for sheet music. He didn't ask what to play. He simply placed his fingers gently on the keys. Everyone leaned forward. Some rested their elbows on their knees. Some held their breath without realizing, and some blinked slower, like they didn't want to miss anything. He began with a single soft note, then another, then a cluster of notes that didn't sound like warm-ups anymore. The sound that filled the room was not loud, it was delicate, smooth, complete. Then, without hesitation, he began to play something beautiful. It wasn't a beginner melody. It wasn't something anyone could learn in one lesson. It wasn't even something that sounded simple. His fingers moved fast, but not rushed like water running over rocks. His hands rose and fell gently, shaping the tone of each note. His body leaned slightly into certain parts, as if the piano were speaking back to him. People stared. Some had wide eyes, others even forgot to breathe. The instructor's hand froze. Halfway to her notebook. A little boy sat on the floor instead of his chair because he wanted to watch closer. What he played had emotional weight, even though no one knew the name of the piece. There was sadness in it, but also a quiet hope. It sounded like someone remembering something that mattered deeply. He closed his eyes at one point, not to perform better, not to impress anyone, but because the music came from somewhere that didn't require sight. He played a part where his left hand carried a slow rhythm, almost like a steady heartbeat, while his right hand moved softly along the top notes, touching high sounds gently, letting them fade before replacing them with new tones. Then he shifted, raising the energy not forcefully, but with intention. It felt like a moment that wanted to break open. Then he slowed back down, letting the sound rest like morning light settling on a quiet street. People listened like they were hearing something private. He finished not with a dramatic ending, not with a big, final strike of keys, but with a soft note that gently faded into nothing. He lifted his hands from the keys and let them rest on his lap. No one clapped, not because they didn't want to, but because they forgot how. It took 3 full seconds silent, long before the room reacted. Then applause broke out, not the usual polite clapping, but a wave of appreciation, like gratitude rising all at once. Some stood, some hit their palms together louder than intended, some smiled without meaning to. The instructor moved closer and said softly, "That was beautiful." He nodded, quietly. Someone nearby asked, "What was that piece?" He paused for a moment, then answered, "Just something I learned a long time ago." He didn't say more. He didn't boast. He didn't claim talent. He simply returned to his seat. But now everything had changed. People looked at him differently, not with pity, not with confusion, but with deep curiosity. At break time, no one crowded around the snack table like usual. Instead, people gathered around him, not tightly, not overwhelming, but respectfully. One person said, "Have you played for many years?" He simply replied, "Yes." Another asked, "Were you taught by someone special?" He said, "Someone who believed in me." A boy asked, "Do you play at home?" He smiled and said, "Sometimes." Someone else whispered, "That wasn't just good. That sounded like a performance." He nodded slightly. "I used to practice every day," he said, not bragging. Just stating a fact. Someone asked, "Are you a musician?" This time he paused longer, then said, "I was, once." His answer created silence again, not uncomfortable silence, but respectful silence. The instructor didn't pry. She only said, "Thank you for playing today." Later, when everyone returned to their seats, they practiced again, but the energy was different. People listened more carefully. They tried harder. They sat straighter. It was as if his playing reminded them that music mattered. When class ended, the instructor asked him again, more gently than before, "Would you like to continue sharing something next time?" He nodded. One person asked shyly, "Could you teach us something?" He replied with warmth, "If you want guidance, I will try." There was something humble in the way he said it, like he wasn't there to be admired, just to help. He didn't rush out of the building that day. He walked slower, letting others speak to him, letting conversations form even if he didn't lead them. One older man said, "I used to play in my youth. I didn't think it mattered anymore." Samuel looked at him gently and said, "It still matters if it still touches you." The man blinked, surprised, as if hearing something he needed. Another person said, "If you played like that before, what made you stop?" Samuel looked toward the door, as if deciding whether to say something. Then quietly he replied, "Life changed. Music became too painful to continue." No one asked more. They knew that was enough. He walked outside, and the evening breeze brushed across his face. The world looked different now, not because it changed, but because he finally allowed himself to step into music again. He didn't play that night at home. He just sat at his quiet table, drinking tea, listening to sounds outside, cars passing, wind touching leaves, distant voices from neighbors. He didn't need to play because what he played earlier was still inside him. Something had opened to something long locked away, something he thought would remain silent forever. Now, it was returning, not fast, not loud, not all at once, but slowly, like a heartbeat rediscovering its rhythm. Next time would not be uncertain. Next time would not be halfway. Next time would be truth. And the community center didn't know yet, but his life before was bigger than anyone imagined. The next session would reveal more, not in words, not in explanations, but in music that carried pieces of him the way photographs carry memories. His quiet smile as he walked home was not pride, not relief. It was simply the beginning of a part of himself finding its way back into the light. The 4th week came, and the community center was almost full before the session even started. The front desk needed extra sign-in sheets. People who had skipped the earlier sessions returned, saying they wanted to be part of the energy they heard about. Some didn't even sign up for class. They came just to sit in the back and watch. The moment Samuel walked in, almost everyone turned at least once, not because he made an entrance, but because he carried silence that drew attention. His old, bag hung on his shoulder like always, and his simple clothing made him blend into the room. Yet he was now someone the group looked toward with curiosity and respect. He sat in the same row, same seat. He nodded gently when someone greeted him. People smiled back a little too eagerly. Last week had changed something without any announcement or request. His music had shifted how people saw him. A new participant sat next to him. She whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "I heard you play last week." People said it was amazing. He didn't react like someone receiving praise. He simply replied, "We all just play what we can." The warm-up started. People tried harder now. Their fingers were steadier, their posture straighter, their attention deeper. The instructor seemed surprised by the improvement. Someone played a slow song they had practiced all week. Another tried a melody from memory. The group was more focused than ever. But unlike previous weeks, the instructor didn't wait long. After a few performances, she said softly, "If you feel comfortable, today we would like to hear your story, not just your music." He didn't rush to answer. He looked down at his hands, as though remembering something. Then he stood. He walked toward the piano, but he did not sit at it. Instead, he stood beside it, resting his palm on its faded wooden edge. He looked at the keys, though he did not touch them yet. Everyone waited. People leaned forward. Even those who came only to observe sat completely still. Then he spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, but simply. "There was a time," he began, "when I played every day. People listened. I traveled often. I had concerts in different cities. Music was a part of every morning, every night, sometimes every hour." He paused, not fishing for reaction, only letting the truth settle at that time. "I had someone close to me who believed I could be something great. That person supported everything I did. They reminded me to rest when I practiced too long. They encouraged me when a performance didn't go well." His voice softened a little. "And when that person was gone, music became something I could not sit with anymore. The piano was too loud. Even silence around it was loud. No one asked who the person was. No one needed to. One woman wiped tears without meaning to. A man stared at the floor, absorbing every word. Even those who had never played an instrument understood." Samuel looked at the piano again. "For years, I avoided touching keys. I would walk past pianos, turn away, or pretend not to see them. I tried other work, tried other roads, tried forgetting." He sat down slowly. "But memory has its own way." Then he placed both hands gently on the keys, not to show skill, but to hold something that once mattered. Before he played, he said softly, "I came here not to impress anyone. I came because I wanted to be near music again without feeling heavy." Then he began to play. It was not the same piece as last week. This one began quietly, almost like a whisper. The first notes touched the air like soft footsteps. The tone was warm, not sad, and not excited, just honest. He played something that felt like conversation. The melody rose, paused, then fell gently. Halfway through, he shifted into a part that sounded like yearning, not painful, but like searching. People watched his hands move, not fast this time, but slow, steady, thoughtful. At one moment, he added a small pause, letting silence sit between notes. And that silence said more than the music. The instructor turned away slightly because her eyes had filled. The young boy sat still, no longer restless. Someone clasped their hands together. The room felt smaller, almost like the walls were listening too. He played for several minutes, not performing, not showing off, just releasing something. Then he reached a part where both hands moved together in harmony. The sound was deeper now, stronger, like something returning that had once been lost. He ended the piece with a gentle downward phrase, like a farewell done calmly. When the final note faded, he didn't move right away. The room waited with him. And then soft applause began. Not explosive, not loud. Just sincere. The instructor approached him, slow, cautious, as if speaking too quickly would break something fragile. "Thank you for sharing that." He nodded. Someone asked quietly, "Was that your own music?" He answered, "Some of it." People sat in silence again, not awkward quiet, but meaningful quiet. Then he added, "I didn't know if I would ever play again. Being here has helped me remember that music is not only about performing. Sometimes it's about being able to sit with what we feel." That line stayed in the room long after he returned to his seat. During break time, he didn't sit alone like before. People came gently, soft voices, not demanding attention. Someone asked him for advice on hand position. Someone else asked how to remember patterns. He answered without sounding like a teacher. He simply helped. "Your left hand is tight." He told one person. "Let it settle. You press too early." He told another, listen, then move, to a shy older man who said, I think I started too late. He answered, you start whenever you begin. There's no late. The man smiled like he had been forgiven for something burdensome. And it wasn't just what Samuel said, it was how he said it, without ego, without authority, simply truthful. After break, the instructor asked him gently, would you like to join the small recital we plan next month? Nothing large, just a local gathering. People watched closely, not expecting a yes, but hoping. He didn't answer immediately. He breathed in, eyes lowered. Then he said softly, I will try. Not a promise. Not excitement, just willingness. The instructor nodded, like she was accepting something sacred. Class continued, and though others played, the focus remained changed. They played differently, not rushing, not trying to show skill, but trying to express something. Before leaving, the instructor spoke privately with him near the door. You play like someone who has walked through something difficult, she said gently. He replied, everyone has something. She nodded. You have helped this class more than you know. He shook his head slightly. I only shared what was already here. And he left. He walked home slower than usual. Instead of taking a bus, he walked through side streets. He passed a bakery, paused by the scent, then continued. He stood by a park bench for a moment, just listening to distant lawn sprinklers. When he reached home, he placed his bag on the chair again. He took out nothing. He didn't play at home, not yet. The piano in his living room stayed untouched, though it no longer frightened him. He touched the side of the instrument lightly and whispered, soon. He boiled water, made tea, sat at the table, and for the first time, he allowed his memories to pass through his mind, not to hurt, but to exist. Images came and went, concert lights, long rehearsals, traveling, laughter, someone sitting beside him during practice sessions. He let those memories breathe, and for the first time since he walked away from music, remembering did not break him. The next session would not be about revealing skill, it would be about guiding others, sharing knowledge, shaping hope instead of hiding from sound. Music had returned, not as pain, not as pressure, but as belonging. He didn't become happier instantly. He didn't become lighter all at once, but something inside him felt settled, not finished, just finally allowed to exist again. The days after the small performance moved quietly, almost as if nothing unusual had happened, but something had changed inside that room, and everyone seemed aware of it. The man who once sat quietly in the back no longer blended into the crowd. People noticed him now. They greeted him when he walked in, not out of politeness, but because they genuinely wanted to speak with him. Some still carried their surprise from that day, replaying what they heard, wondering how such skill could come from someone who talked so little. He arrived early most mornings, not rushing, not eager to take attention, but simply because he wanted time with the piano. Before the room filled up, the staff would often find him sitting there with his bag on the ground, waiting patiently. Sometimes he wiped dust off the piano keys with a cloth he carried, as if it was something precious. Even that small action showed care, gentleness, and respect. When others began to enter the room, he moved aside so they could play. He never fought for space. He waited, and when the piano was free, he sat down again. People began observing that he never played loudly when alone. He played soft melodies, like whispered conversations between his hands and the keys. Soon, younger students started approaching him, first out of curiosity, then out of admiration. One young boy stood beside him one day and asked, "How do you make it sound like that?" His voice was shaky, the way it often is when kids speak to adults they admire. The man looked at him for a moment, then gently said, "Come sit here." The boy sat, and the man moved his hands slowly, showing finger placement, explaining how soft notes could carry emotion without force. The boy's small fingers tried, pressing harder than necessary. The man chuckled softly, not in a mocking way, but with warmth, and said, "Let your hand relax. The music comes from how you feel, not how hard you push." The boy tried again, and the note changed from harsh to light. Others watched. A teenager approached and asked if he could learn too. The man smiled faintly and nodded. The next day, different students came with notebooks, wanting to write things down. Eventually, the staff began encouraging this interaction. They saw how comfortable he was guiding others, and they saw how students benefited. His quiet nature never changed, but the room felt safer when he was in it. People became more patient, more thoughtful, less competitive. It was as though his presence softened something in everyone. One morning, the center administrator approached him. "We've been discussing something," she said, her voice calm and friendly. He looked up with slight confusion. She continued, "We were thinking, Maybe you could lead a small weekly session? Not a class, just a time when students could learn from you. He lowered his gaze, almost uncomfortable. He was not someone who chased roles or titles. After a few seconds, he responded, I don't know if I'm the right person. I only came here to play. She nodded with understanding. Just think about it. The students look up to you. You bring something valuable, and we'd love to see more of that. He didn't answer right away. He sat with the idea for several days. Each day, students continued asking questions, sitting beside him, watching him play. They treated him not like someone distant, but like someone who gave them strength eventually. He agreed, not formally, not publicly. He simply began staying longer and spending time teaching whoever wanted to learn. The staff did not need to announce anything. Everyone simply knew that, at a certain hour, he would be there. Some evenings, the lights were dim because the staff was preparing to close. Yet he still sat with students finishing a song, working through a difficult phrase, repeating parts until confidence replaced hesitation. The more he taught, the more people opened up to him. They learned that music had not always been a simple companion in his life. Through small pieces shared here and there, they understood that the piano once carried memories that were painful to touch. A part of his past was tied to moments he did not speak about easily. His return to music was not for achievement or applause, but for peace. One day, a woman at the center invited him to speak at a small community gathering. She said people would love to hear him play just one piece. He paused. The idea of performing publicly again made his chest tighten slightly. He thought of all the times he had performed years ago, bright stages, crowded halls, heavy expectations. Those memories did not sit comfortably. I don't think I can, he said softly. She didn't push. She simply smiled and replied, if you ever change your mind, just tell us. Weeks passed. The invitation drifted into silence, but something kept reminding him of its students learning confidently. People clapping when someone finished a difficult piece. Faces lit up when new progress was seen. Their joy began replacing the weight his memories once carried. One afternoon, while packing his bag, he approached the staff counter and said, about that invitation, I'll play just one piece. The staff member blinked, surprised but thrilled. Of course. Whenever you're ready, we'll set it up. The announcement spread quickly, but not loudly. No posters, no stage lights, just whispers from person to person. The community waited not with pressure, but with quiet respect. When the evening came, chairs were arranged in a small semicircle. Families of students came, along with a few neighbors who had heard stories. There was no crowd too large, nothing demanding perfection. It was simply a warm room filled with people who cared. He walked in wearing the same calm expression he always carried. He didn't make a speech. He sat at the piano, placed both hands gently on the keys, and closed his eyes. When he played, it was different from anything the students had heard him play before. His fingers moved slowly at first, as though searching through memories, then stronger, clearer, deeper. The piece sounded like something written from emotion rather than sheet music full of sadness, relief, gratitude, and quiet strength. Some people wiped tears without knowing why. They didn't know the full story behind those notes, but they felt something close to it. When he finished, he stood slowly and bowed, not like a performer on a grand stage, but like a man returning to something that belonged to him long ago. People clapped, not loud, not explosive, but long and heartfelt. One student stood up first, then another, then everyone. It was not applause for a show. It was appreciation for someone who shared something personal. After that evening, nothing about him changed on the surface. He still arrived early, still waited his turn, still taught quietly. But people now looked at him differently, not because he surprised them with skill again, but because he allowed himself to step forward and share what he carried inside. He had returned not to fame, not to recognition, but to meaning. And that was enough.